to this week's Gig Diary. These are the videos where I'm trying to give you a flavour of what it's like to be a musician working in the UK. So coming up in this week's video, a nice view out the window from the gig, some more gigging fashion tips, cuff of your shirts, that solo again, some Quad Cortex tips, and running in parallel is my capture, and some Stevie Ray Vaughan impersonations. So before I get onto the gig footage this week, I'm going to broaden out the scope of this video slightly by going into some more features on the Quad Cortex 1.4.0 update. So there were some more devices that I didn't cover last week, so I've done a separate little video with my headphones on where I'm able to show you the new devices. So here we go, here's the first one coming up. Last week I covered some of the new devices that came out on the Quad Cortex with Core OS 1.4.0. In the week, Digital Chris, hi Chris, who watches and often leaves me comments and has told me some very useful stuff. He pointed out that there's now a model of the Boss Dimension C pedal, which also has the mode on it, which sounds like the studio chorus unit that Stevie Ray Vaughan used to use, which turns out to be quite an important part of his sound. Now I did a whole video on that where I used the UAD plugin of that unit to recreate Stevie Ray Vaughan sound, so I'll link to that here. But this means I can do it all in the box, because on the prior video you would have needed the external plugins to it, but now I'm going to use the same plugin which I used. Let me show you on the GoPro. So on this plugin, well, this is it on the stomp mode. So I've got my EP booster, which I put on most of my plugins just because I like the sound of it. That was my capture of my own device, and then my capture of my Keeley modded TS808, which Stevie Ray Vaughan used. But the bits I've used on here, which I don't use on my other presets necessarily, I've got a Vertex Effects Steel String Supreme pedal, which is a kind of copy of the Steel String Singer that Stevie Ray Vaughan used. So I captured that, just the sort of preamp section rather than the gain section, and I put a spring reverb behind it and a, what's the cab I used, a 1x12 deluxe tweed cab. And running in parallel is my capture of my Vibreverb, which is over there, which has got all the, it's the hand-wired Fender Custom one with the Caesar Diaz mods on, the same as Stevie Ray Vaughan had. So I had those all turned on with the diode rectifier and the extra gain stage, and I put the settings about what Stevie Ray Vaughan had it on. So I captured that and put another spring reverb on, and then it runs into just an ambience sound, which I'll probably turn off when I do the recording, but it's great for monitoring. That's a rotary, which I used if I'm doing cold shot or something like that. But at the very end, I've added in the Chief DC2W. So as I say, that's the Boss Dimension C, I believe. I've dropped the mix down to 59%. I mean, just around 50, because Stevie Ray Vaughan used to ride the fader for bringing it in parallel with the clean signal, because it just adds stereo spread. Mode 1, that's the most subtle one. If you start turning it up more than that, you get a lot of obvious chorus, which you don't get in Stevie Ray Vaughan sound. And I've got it on the mode STD320. Now that's the mode that models the studio unit that I'm talking about. And I've just left the output where it is. Right, let me show you what that sounds like. There's a big difference here. That's on. So this is what it sounds like in mono. Let's turn the tube screamer off. Let's put it into stereo, adding in the Boss thing. And off again. And on. Off. On. I have to listen to it with headphones to hear the full stereo effect, but I think that makes a big difference. So I'm going to do the track, do it with the track again so you can hear it, and this time I'm not going to have to put on any plugins afterwards. So here we go with that. Now before I get to the first gig, I'm going to show you the preset that I'm using on the first gig I'm going to show you. Now over the past few weeks I've been tinkering with this preset and adding various different units and stuff on the preset, because I go from my Quad Cortex into the band amp, which is a deluxe Hot Rod Blues Deluxe or something like that. All the numbers and everything are rubbed off, so I'm not exactly sure which model it is, but I think it's the Fender Hot Rod Blues Deluxe, and I run my Quad Cortex as a pedal board effectively, and I've been adding various different things as I discover what I need for different sounds in the set. So here's a little video just coming up here of me demonstrating some of the new sounds I've put into it. This preset keeps evolving that I'm using with the Mixed Feelings band, which I'm going to show you some of the clips from that. And I had a comment on my last week's video from Chuck saying, have I tried the Vemeral Ray device, the new device on the QC, which is the model of the Jan Ray, can't remember what it is, drive. It's quite a well-known drive, similar to a Timmy drive apparently, and it does sound good, so I'm just going to demonstrate that. So it plugs into the Vibra King, so that's the clean sound. This is with the Vemeral Ray overdrive. So yeah, that was a good tip. I think that sounds really good. This is with the Exotic and the Vemeral Ray on. The other thing I've added, because I needed it for a few different tracks which I didn't realise, was I needed a fuzz, so we could do Satisfaction, except I won't do it, because if I play the riff I'm bound to get a copyright claim on the video. But this is the sound. So there we go. I keep growing this preset. I wonder if at some point I might need a second preset with some different effects for different songs, because I've got the envelope filter on here. And I've got the Dream Chorus. I've got a delay. And all the overdrives which I showed you last week with that new one, the Vemeral Ray. So there we are, that's what I'm using on these next clips. Before we get to the first bit of footage, I must show you this photo I took. This was out of the window of the room that we were actually playing in. It's a very nice view of Tower Bridge in London. Do get to play in some nice places actually doing these kind of gigs. What was interesting, there was a photographer there who had up against the window a backdrop with famous landmarks of London on it, which was obscuring the actual landmarks of London on it. Not quite sure how that works. Onto the gig footage. Now if you've seen my videos over the last few weeks, you've seen that I've been mainly using my James Tyler Strat on this gig, and I've been struggling to get enough nice shimmery treble. It's been partly to do with the overdrives I've been selecting, but anyway I decided to use my Telecaster on this gig, which is probably a more toppy guitar. So have a listen to this. If you've listened to my previous videos, you'll hear the difference in sound. I think I prefer there's more top on this, but that might be to do with the changes I made on the preset. This first one is a little bit of a solo in Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, the Jackson song. Here's another solo in a Wham song of all things. I've done this solo a few times on the last few videos. This is over the intro of Treasure by Bruno Mars. And finally, that solo again with a white t-shirt on this week. Now on to the next gig. I didn't use my Quad Cortex on this, but what I did do was I used my in-ear monitors for the first time in a long time, but I used them with my amp, my normal setup, my normal pedal board and car Viceroy amp. Now this was an interesting one because we had to play very quietly. There was a sound limiter in the venue. Now I should have taken a photo of this venue because it's literally in the middle of nowhere. You can't see any houses in any direction, but for some reason they put a restriction on the amount of noise you can make. And I have to say I very much struggled with the sound in my in-ears. It sounded like the amp really wasn't working, but when you see the footage you'll see that actually the sound was quite good in the room. And this is all a learning curve with the in-ears, and I think what I'm going to try next time, and I have spoken to the sound man from Saturday since I last did the gig, is I probably need more ambience. Someone has suggested that to me before, but either a room mic or maybe the drum overheads, because the trouble is you're hearing the microphone right in front of the speaker, and if it's too isolated you're hearing everything, which is often covered up from when you're hearing it from when the amp's down behind you, when you're hearing it without the in-ear monitors. Now for vocals I love the in-ear monitors, it's so much clearer and you don't lose your voice, it's much easier, but I'm still struggling to get a good electric guitar sound. It's probably slightly easier with the Quad Cortex, and if I'd known on this gig that we were going to have to play so quietly I would have just used the Quad Cortex and not bothered with my amp, but I didn't realise that and I had the amp with me. Still prefer using an amp really and hearing that in context with the bass and drums, but as you can hear from this, it was still quite a good sound, so I've got more to learn with that. The first solo, and this was before we really had to turn down, this is from Funky Music. Next solo, I had to take the sax solo in Think. Now if you've ever played Think, you'll know that it's a bit of a funny middle 8 section. It goes to the sharp 4 chord, a minor with the sharp 4 chord, and then I think the story goes that originally it was going to do a key change after that, but it never did. It goes back to the original key, but it's a bit of a funny one. But anyway, we didn't have a sax player, so I had to do the guitar solo. If you saw last week's video, you'd have seen that I was giving some lovely fashion tips, you know, one of my specialised subjects, because I bought a pair of Fender Wrangler jeans. Inspired by that, I thought I'd do another sartorial segment here. Now, in this gig footage that I'm showing you at the moment, you'll see that my sleeve of my black shirt while I'm strumming is rubbing on the guitar strings, and I thought, well, your clothes do take a bit of a beating when you're gigging on the guitar. I should have to show you my suit another week. I don't tend to wear that as often, but that will all go shiny, like the sleeves, all the bits that rub against the guitar. But this is what happens to the cuff of your shirts. Now, can we see this? Let me see if we can get a focus on here. You can see the shirt gets completely destroyed on the cuff. Thought it was interesting, trying to show you what it's like to be a musician in the UK. Cuff wearage, very serious matter. Then a bit of Dolly Parton, bit of country guitar, the only chance I got to do it on the gig. And then finally, covering another sax solo, because we didn't have a sax, so trying to copy one of those iconic solos in Simply the Best by Tina Turner. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. I'm bringing out gig diaries every week. I'm going to start including different bits and pieces, technical stuff, as I have been, but I'm going to increase the scope, I think, of the videos. So please hit subscribe, hit like, leave me a comment, please. Very useful. A couple of useful bits in this video from comments. And I'll see you next Friday.